Exactly.
Hello, hello, hello.
That's it. We got you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Doc. We are live, so we're broadcasting.
Oh, we're live? Okay.
We're broadcasting here.
Someone was saying, I will introduce her later on, saying that you have been a blessing this
Oh,
morning.
thank you. That's nice to hear.
So,
What do you want me to do? What?
so you are live now. Your mic is live.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to introduce you this morning, this afternoon again?
I can.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would just to ask those standing at the back if you can take your seats. It's very nice to have you with us this afternoon. So we are all ready to start our program. So before we start, I think it's good if we start with a word of prayer, if you don't mind. Okay. Dear Jesus, thank you very much for the day that you have been giving us so far. Thank you for all the blessings through Beatrice. And we ask you again to be blessed through her message. Help us during this afternoon. And we ask this in your name. Amen. I don't think it needs to introduce our speaker from this morning. I think she was well introduced. And I told her once a person do the service is already part of the Newbold community, so she's already family.
I'm already family. That's always good to hear. Thank you so much, Isabel, again for the nice invitation. I'm always happy to be here and to be speaking and to be presenting. In fact, I really like doing workshops and spreading my opinions and my wisdoms. Now, joking aside, I'm very happy to be here and happy to see some of you again from this morning and also from many years ago. It makes me feel young and old at the same time. So I'm Beatrice, and today is all about optimism. So optimism is a very important subject, and we talked about a little bit how we can practice to be optimistic. And this afternoon, we're going to look a little bit more in detail how we can actually do that. So, I have we do have a presentation. I hope it's going to come up on the screen. Still nothing. That's okay. So, I just have a question to all of you. Would you call yourself optimists or realists or pessimists? So what is your own outlook in life? Depends. Yeah, on the circumstances, that's right. Yeah, an optimist when the sun shines and a pessimist when it rains. Well, today we learned that we actually have to be completely the opposite, an optimist when it rains and a pessimist when the sun shines. So what is optimism? Optimism is, of course, a synonym for many other words: faith, hope, even happiness and joyfulness. We can say a positive attitude. In the last few years during the pandemic, of course, being positive was not such a desirable outcome, and it was better when you were negative, wasn't it? But now it's basically being optimistic is being a positive person. So it has been defined as an enduring tendency to expect good personal outcomes in the future. So even though things are not going great, you still have a tendency to believe somehow it's going to work out. So the dictionary definition is, of course, hopefulness and confidence. Now, the most famous optimist in biblical times was, of course, the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul has a very interesting way of showing his optimism. So, for example, we read this morning also in the second letter to the Corinthians. So it's interesting how he defines optimism, because he writes in the chapter 11 from verse 24, "From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods, and once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked, and a night and a day I have been in the deep. In journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Besides the other things, what comes upon me daily? My deep concern for the churches." That doesn't sound very optimistic to me, and yet this is exactly what he boasts about, because later on he goes to say, "I boast in my weakness, because when I'm weak, I'm strong." The Apostle Paul, the ultimate optimist. After all these things that happened to him, how many of us would have just given up and said, well, maybe it's not meant to be? He rejoiced. He would say, no, whatever happens, I keep going. I don't care. And that was, of course, a very interesting outlook on life. That was the ultimate positivity. So what's the difference between optimism and realism? We talked about this morning a little bit, and I have the theory that the two are actually not so different at all. So hope and faith in the face of affliction, or despite affliction, or because of affliction, is the ability to, it's resilience really, it's the ability to bounce back from whatever life throws at us. It doesn't mean, of course, that we're blind to reality, but to be aware of reality and to hold on steadfastly anyway. And optimists, according to a study, adjust their behavior to the situation, but not their goals or actions. And that is a very important bit. You can adjust your behavior to a situation, but not your goal. So even though Paul faced so much adversity, he adjusted his behavior, but his goal was always crystal clear. So when we talk about optimism, we always have to think about, well, what's the difference? What does it mean being negative? So let's talk a little bit about this, because if we say, oh, I'm a positive person, well, then let's unpack this and let's see what does it mean But in order to find out what it means to be a positive person, we have to unpack and see what it actually means to be negative and to have a more negative outlook on life. And basically, the negative outlook on life is called a cognitive distortion. Negative thinking patterns take hold of us quite easily, and I'm sure when we talk about examples later on, many of you have actually fallen prey to some of those as well. And those negative thinking patterns are called cognitive distortions, and they make our problems bigger than they actually are. And our problems sometimes feel that they are all-encompassing, and they become personal. So often we feel that we are the problem, that I am the problem, but not the actual problem is the problem. So I break a mug, and instead of saying, well, it's the broken mug, I say it's my failure. I am the failure. So when harmful patterns of thoughts occur repeatedly, that is a cognitive distortion. So we use the term distortion because it's these negative thoughts that distort our reality and lead to untrue and unrealistic worldview. And we have to learn to identify these cognitive distortions and to break free from them to be truly optimistic. So once we recognize them and learn to cope with them, that's when the negative thought pattern is actually just starting. Then we have a better chance of nipping it in the bud and to disrupt this pattern before it spirals into a mental health crisis. So let's look at that. Of course, negative thinking patterns have a great impact on depression, and it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg situation. Is being negative a symptom of depression, or is depression a symptom of a negative outlook in life? So depression leads to negative thinking, but of course negative thinking ultimately will also lead to depression. So of course the link between negative thinking patterns and depression is not surprising to anybody who has ever struggled with a mental health crisis or depression. And the link between the two is cyclical, and you never really know where the one starts and the other ends. So for example, somebody who's suffering from a clinical depression may struggle to find the energy to even get out of bed in the morning, even on a good day. And now if you add a negative thought pattern that leads to hopelessness, what's the point of getting out of bed? Nobody cares about me anyway. Nobody cares about what I'm doing today anyway. Then, of course, we have another significant obstacle impairing the function of a depressed person, and, of course, impairs also the healing process. So let's think about this. What are common distortions? It's often black and white thinking. It's either good or bad, all or nothing. It's an all or nothing mindset that makes it very hard to have room for compromise. So that is called polarization or dichotomous thinking. Yes, it's me versus them, good against evil. It's them against us. So it's always this all or nothing. But life is very much a grayscale, and many situations are nuanced. So it's very tricky to oversimplify things without going in the wrong direction at some point. Now, there's another distortion. It's called mental filtering. So obviously, everybody likes to be correct and to be right, okay? But this desire to be right becomes a cognitive distortion when it outweighs evidence or logic, okay, and material reality. And this is where we have a lot of problems. Oh, thank you so much. With people that really believe they're definitely right, but they're not willing to change their opinions, even if evidence is presented. And that is a fallacy called mental filtering, because the need to be right, to be accepted, outweighs the need for logic. Now, that is, of course, the inability to be wrong. Then we have the mental filtering, of course, where you only remember the bad things of the day. Okay? And we have the control fallacies, that we either feel totally powerless in everything that's happening, I can't do anything to change the situation, or I feel I'm 100% in control, and this is why whatever goes wrong is 100% my fault. So these are the different distortions that we sometimes can fall can fall prey to. This is the trap that we can sometimes really fall in, because it happens that we think about this. Now let's think about other ones. For example, we have overgeneralization. So generalizing something or simplifying it to make it sound worse. So for example, Abulena, our daughter, she's outside. She did not want to listen to Mommy's boring presentation, but she would say, for anything at all, this is the worst day ever. Of course, she loves saying that, especially when I have ruined a perfectly fabulous day. She said this to me once because I dared to criticize her. So of course that is an overgeneralization, because obviously the day didn't go that badly. It was just this one thing that went bad. Okay? Then of course we have labeling. Labeling is another distortion, because I attach a label to somebody else or to myself. So I break a mug, or I do something. What do I say? I am useless. I am such a chump. How can this happen to me? And I attach a label to myself. Of course, another distortion is mind reading. I feel that I can read everybody's mind. I presume that I know exactly what the other person is thinking. And usually that leads to statements like, everybody hates me, everybody thinks it's that boring, and these are things that are, of course, a fallacy or a cognitive distortion, because they're not true. All right, and then, of course, we have catastrophizing and fortune-telling, being convinced that something terrible is going to happen or has happened. Case in point, my mom watched once watched a live presentation of mine, a church presentation, and the person introducing us, they prayed for me, and that was beautiful and wonderful. But her mind jumped immediately. What has happened? She must be ill. Why are they praying for her? So I got a very panicky phone call from her, and I said, well, nothing happened. It's nice when people pray for me, isn't it? But she would say, no, I was convinced something was wrong, because why would they pray for you in a different setting? So this is, of course, a cognitive distortion. So if we're dwelling on negative thinking patterns, then we have a negative outlook in life. It just happens. For example, once I locked my car keys inside the car, and that was not great. And I felt terrible the whole day, because, people had to come out to wrench open the door somehow, get the key out, and it was very complicated, of course. And instead of just seeing the problem as the problem and saying, well, it happens, everybody locks their keys sometimes in the car. I'm sure it has happened to many people of you, you just don't admit it. But instead of just seeing it as a mistake, I labeled myself for a very long time and said, I'm useless, I'm so forgetful, I am this, I am that. And that's, of course, a negative thinking pattern and a cognitive distortion. Now, what are the habits? Because negative thinking patterns and cognitive distortions, they don't just happen, but they are created from negative habits. So let's look at those habits that lead to a cognitive distortion. So those are habits that I hope you don't practice. And once you recognize that you are actually in those habits, then you know you're on the road to ruin. So let's think about it. Overthinking. If you're overthinking things, if you look at your role in every decision of yours from every possible angle and trying to model every potential outcome in your mind, what is going to happen if this happens? What is going to happen if that happens? Of course, the control freaks among us, we would say, well, it's important to be prepared. But sometimes we just overthink things because it can be exhausting and devastating. And if of course, our predictions turn out to be wrong. So if you have to avoid overthinking and limit it, okay? For example, when you tend to overthink and you just can't make up your mind because you're thinking, well, if I decide for this, and you overthink for the rest of your day just what's the possible outcome for that decision, and then you keep thinking what would be the possible outcome if you didn't make that decision, well, you will never make that decision in the first place. So a way to break that habit would be to limit yourself, to set yourself a deadline. I have to decide today, or I have to decide in an hour. So that is a way to do it. And of course, once you make a choice, you have to stick by them. An interesting way of making a choice, if you just can't decide because you're overthinking it, is to throw a coin or to flip a coin. And if you're happy with the result, stick by it. If you're unhappy with the result, just do the other one. So this is a way of limiting overthinking. Now, the other bad habit is, of course, rumination. When we're projecting our flaws and into the vision of our future, okay? Thinking that whatever's going to happen is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And rumination, of course, when does it happen most of the time? It happens at night. Lying at night, overthinking things, ruminating over things, having a bad outlook, being super stressed. That is a cycle that we have to break. So, of course, when you notice that you're fixated on a possible negative outcome, you have to break that cycle and you have to stop dwelling on negative thoughts. Don't allow yourself to be alone with your thoughts in the first place, but actually talk with somebody about them, or if it is in the middle of the night, read a book, watch a movie, work on a hobby, get up, but stop ruminating, because that actually leads to a negative thinking pattern. And of course, overeating or intoxication in such a situation only makes it worse. So the typical outings to the fridge in the middle of the night, they are never a solution to a problem, okay? Then we have, of course, cynical hostility, directing our anger and mistrust and judgment or disdain at others. They can't like me, or they don't like me anyway, so in order not to be vulnerable, I just don't like them first. Okay, that is kind of the way we react, and seeing people as dangerous, evil, or untrustworthy. And that's, of course, a very sad outlook in life and a sad perspective. So this type of thinking makes it very difficult to maintain a support system, because we see people as dangerous or untrustworthy. Now, this hostile demeanor is closely linked to heart disease, for example, and increased blood pressure. Because if you can't trust anybody, or if you don't trust anybody, or if you don't believe in the good of the other people that you're with, then of course you don't have a place where you can feel safe. So you have to find ways to reframe the situations and be more cooperative and not competitive. So it's these bad habits, there are more, but I'm limiting it to 3, that can lead to negative thinking patterns. Now, before we all fall asleep, I think it's time for a little activity break. And Isabel had something prepared for us. Take it away.
I have not yet come to a conclusion if this is a break for us or if it's a break for Beatrice. But anyway, we will all have a little break because, you know, when we are really absorbing a lot of information, we should allow our brains to process that information. And the best way to process the information actually is through oxygen. So if you have a very good oxygenation of your brain is much more effective, performs much better. So I will ask you to stand. Sorry, it's time to stand. This is just a few minutes. And to make sure you don't fall asleep after lunch. I know this is a very, very good topic, so I doubt it. You can't just nod Roberto. Definitely Roberto needs to oxygenate his brain. Okay. So let's start. Deep breathe, like try to feel as much as you can your lungs. Stretch your hair, yeah? And then very slowly breathe out. Sorry, I can't do it because I'm talking. And now we do it again. Hold it for a few minutes, and then I will tell you what's happened in terms of biochemistry. When you breathe in, all the oxygen comes. When you hold it, your cells are doing oxygen transfer with CO2. And then you breathe out very slowly, maximizing the amount of carbon dioxide that is coming out. So again. How do you feel? If you carry on doing this, you probably will feel asleep as well. But there is a balance for everything, right? And now do this. You're not dancing. It's just, improving the blood flow of your legs since you have been sit down for a bit. You should do this actually when you go for long flights. But if you start doing this on the plane, probably will look a bit odd. But you can go to the toilet and do it a bit, right? Right. You can, and now again, like that. Don't be shy. I know this is a church, but, it's not the morning service. And you are doing actually quite well to your body. Good. How do you feel? Stretched? Better? Yeah? Do you think... Okay. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Isabel. That was very, very good and definitely needed. I'm not judging anybody. To be honest, I'm quite tired myself. So, so I needed that as well to wake up. So, no, we're going to get there somehow. Yes, an awareness check is always good, especially when we feel that we're in a negative thinking pattern or in a negative situation. An awareness check actually helps, okay? Just where I am, where am I standing, are my feet on the floor, am I grounded? And breathing, of course, knowing that my muscles are tense or relaxed. So always get back to yourself and check how you're feeling, okay? So let's go back and let's see what we can do about our negative thinking patterns, because of course all of us have at least once or twice felt like that. And again, for example, Julian, and those of you who know Julian, they know he can be dramatic at times. So, he's a very pleasant guy, but once he's driving a car, the tables turn a little bit, and when he's in a traffic situation or the third red traffic light, his day can very quickly be completely destroyed, even though his day was going fine until that third traffic light, but now the day is destroyed, so negative thinking pattern right there. So obviously optimism can be trained. We can train it, and there's even a model, and that is easy to follow, and that is called the ABCDE model by Albert Ellis. And that's a coaching model that has, of course, 5 stages. It starts with the actual event. And then, of course, your beliefs that are created by that event, the consequences that are the consequences of your beliefs. But it doesn't stop there. It's also the disputation of those beliefs. And, of course, the effective new approach to dealing with the problem. So let's unpack this and let's see what happens with that. Let's think about the activating event or situation. Let's search for the triggers of negativity. Well, what was the situation that caused you distress? What was the starting point of such a negative thinking pattern? So our emotions and behaviors are not directly determined by events, okay? But by the way those events are cognitively processed and evaluated. Okay, it's not a simple matter of an unchangeable process that results in certain consequences, but the type of belief about what is happening that actually has an influence on the consequences of whatever happened. And then we have the power to change those beliefs. So if I think about that very dramatic situation when I locked my key in the car, that was a very triggering and activating event. And it was an event that was not pleasant. It was raining. I didn't know where to go. It was a very, very awkward situation because whoever I turned to for help, they would have such helpful suggestions like smash the window of your car. Now that is, of course, not a great suggestion, so I even managed to when I walked a little bit up and down that road where it happened, and there was even a garage of a mechanic, and I thought, okay, there's a car mechanic, they would know what to do. I also wanted to smash my window, and I thought, I'm not smashing the window, it's not happening. And thankfully, I managed to call somebody who would call the German equivalent of the AA, and they would come and they had a very special tool to open the door. So that actually helped me, but it was an event that led to a very negative thinking pattern and belief about myself, me being terribly forgetful, very, very confused, and a chump, really. So understand the underlying belief structures and systems. How did that event make you feel? Why did you feel that way? Why would I jump immediately to the conclusion, well, I'm a chump? Why wouldn't I think about, this happens, my goodness, I was tired. But why would I jump immediately to that conclusion? What is the basis for this belief? Of course, the basis for a negative thinking pattern can be found in vulnerability, in insecurity, in a number of events, in opinions that people have told us, in bullying situations. So, of course, a belief about an event, a belief about ourselves that can lead to devastating consequences. So let's think about the consequences. And we understand the impact that our beliefs actually have. So let me try to find the next slide. This does not work for some reason. It is on, there we have the consequences. So we have to understand the impact of your beliefs. How did your beliefs lead you to act? And what did you do that you would normally not do as a result of those beliefs and emotions? Now when we think back to Paul, when he said he was beaten, he was shipwrecked, he was contested at every possible level. If he had believed that he is a chump, that he is a failure, that he's doing everything wrong, he would have probably given up and not planted all those wonderful churches. So let's think of Paul and the consequences of his belief system. Had he believed that he is a failure, he would not have succeeded. What would have been the consequences of that false belief? The consequences, of course, would be devastating. Would be to give up, to smash that car window. Okay? So consequences of the belief system lead you to act in an emotional way that is probably not a great way to act. So I want you to think about this a little bit. So let's think about some examples, okay? So those were my car keys, okay? Depressive symptoms can lead to depression. And of course, a deep-seated sense of insecurity can surface right there. So let's think about this and think about it, what happened in your life, okay? And take 5 minutes or so to think about a similar situation. It could have been something more complex, could have been something more devastating, or something as funny and awkward as a lost car key, okay? But think about how it affected you, okay? So when I think about Albulena, when I ruined a perfectly fabulous day, we were arguing about her handwriting. She was going to practice her handwriting, and it was the letter F. And she drew the letter F beautifully, but it was not the letter F. So I dared to tell her, well, that is not exactly how you do it. You should probably do it like that. And that was the wrong thing to say to my little daughter, who felt very entitled and did not like to be wrong, of course, another negative distortion right there. So she shouted at me and said, "You ruined a perfectly fabulous day." That, of course, stays with me for a while, because that's a very negative thinking pattern I don't want her to have, that I am the one that ruins her day. But again, it's a negative thinking pattern that leads to consequences. And the consequence in this case could have been having a little argument with a child, or feeling really bad, going to bed at night, feeling that this day was ruined, instead of feeling that this day was okay and one little thing didn't work out. So this is an exercise that I encourage everybody to do at some point for anything that happens, because little things happen every day. Now, today in the children's story, we talked about a man, Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, whoops, where are we there? Was bullied, of course, for not inventing the light bulb for 700 times. Okay, but he managed after 700 times. So he said, "I've succeeded in proving 700 ways how not to build a light bulb." So yes, he did keep going. You probably know the joke about the two prisoners that escaped this very high security prison, and that security prison is surrounded by 100 walls, by 100 really high, very difficult to cross walls. And they cross one wall after the other. They climb, they fall, they get scratched by the barbed wire. And on the 99th wall, one prisoner says, "You know what, I can't go on anymore. I'm done. I'm really so exhausted. I can't go on." And the other prisoner says, "Okay, you're right. Let's go back." That's probably not a good attitude to have. So keeping going is always an important attitude. So now let's move on to the D and the E of the ABCDE model. And the D is the disputation of your beliefs. Yes, because you can challenge yourself and you can challenge your belief structure. Because there are a few simple questions that you can ask yourselves. Does this belief actually help? Does it help if you tell yourself that you're a failure? Did it help me sitting crying next to the car? "Oh, I'm so dumb, how could this happen?" No, it's not helpful at all. Now, what would happen if I had different beliefs? This is another very important question to ask. Well, if I thought of myself differently, maybe I wouldn't feel so bad. Like how, and then the next step would be, how would a different belief lead to a different outcome? Okay, this is a very important point here, because if you would think of yourself not as a problem, but if you would think of the problem as the problem, maybe you wouldn't feel the way you're feeling. Okay, so always good to challenge yourself, to challenge your beliefs. Let's move on to the E, because the consequence, of course, of a disputation leads to an effective new approach. You can replace your unhelpful beliefs with the helpful ones to say, well, it's not too bad. I can do this. It's one little setback. Maybe I can go on. So what's the rational truth in the situation? Being rational, being logical, always helps us to see things in perspective. So yes, the perfectly fabulous day was not completely ruined, but it's just one minor little thing that was not great in a perfectly fabulous day. So the rational truth is always taking a step back and looking at it from a different perspective. Now, of course, replacing your beliefs with other helpful beliefs that are helpful to you in this situation. So when we talk about the model, then of course we have to continue with the D, the disputation of your false beliefs or of your unhelpful beliefs, and then of course to the effective new beliefs that lead to a totally new approach and a totally new outlook on life. You have control. And it is important to understand that you have control in your life. It is important to know that you can't control certain situations, but you can always control your reaction to them, okay? You can always control how you react and how you respond. If the traffic light turns red for the third time and you get really exasperated, you can't control the traffic, you can't control the traffic light, but you can control your own reaction. You can say, well, it is not that late. And I don't know if you use the sat-nav a lot. We're using it a lot because we're new to the UK, so of course we find the supermarket now without it, but in the beginning we would use it a lot. And I don't know if you know, for example, the expected arrival time, the ETA. It would always say ETA is that time. And you say, oh, that's far too late. I have to go faster. So you would always try to go a little bit faster to make a sooner ETA. But what happens usually, and that is quite disappointing and sobering at the same time, that ETA doesn't change, even if you consistently go faster. So even if I am on the motorway and I stick to the upper possible speed limit and I just really try to get there, I can make it maybe 2 minutes earlier. But that's usually as good as it gets. We can never make it 10 minutes earlier. We can never shave off a clear half hour of our trip. It doesn't happen, even if we really try very hard. So it is a sobering thought to know, okay, we do have control, but we do not control traffic, we don't control the ETA, because the sat-nav just knows, even if you go as fast as you possibly can, that is your arrival time. So the more positively we respond to a situation, the more positive the outcomes will be, just because we have adjusted our expectations. Of course, it doesn't mean that nothing will happen to us, or that there will be no harm, no hardship, or no sadness, no tragedies. That doesn't happen. But with a positive attitude that doesn't let us go down the rabbit hole to think negatively, to let it ruin our lives, we can overcome things. A positive attitude gets us through the rough times quicker and more effectively. Okay, there we go. Resilience plays a large role. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit about resilience and emotional resilience. So resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity. Of course, a positive attitude helps us to be more resilient. Yes, we had a setback, but we can overcome it. And a setback doesn't paralyze us for the next few years or months or weeks or minutes, but a positive attitude helps us to get there faster. Now let's think about what the Bible has to say about these things. There is biblical truth, and yes, the Apostle Paul has his positivity that he brings in everything. And yes, he was boasting about his setbacks. He was boasting about his hardships. He was boasting about his weakness. But what did he write? In prison, in Rome, waiting for his execution, he wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord always," in his letter to the Philippians. He said, "I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. Do not be anxious about anything at all, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God." With prayer and thanksgiving. "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." What is he really saying here? He says, be grateful for what you have. Count your blessings. Don't be anxious about things that you cannot change. But God understands your situation. The peace of God transcends all understanding. Sometimes we don't know what is going on in our lives, but God does. And he knows what it is for. He knows what he wants to shape us for in order to achieve a certain goal. And he is there for us. So we can have that trust in the Lord. And finally, brothers and sisters, what does the apostle say again? He says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely and admirable and excellent and praiseworthy. Think about such things. The Apostle Paul knows how to counteract negative thinking patterns and cognitive distortions. Because if we're thinking of negative things, we will have negative outcomes. But if we keep our minds set on the good, we will know where this is going. Hold on, so I keep pushing this very hard. This is why it skips ahead sometimes. So finally, he says, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, and admirable. If anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Train your brain. And whatever you have learned or received or heard from me, yes, from Paul, the ultimate optimist, put into practice. And the God of peace will be with you. And there he says the word peace again. And this is what we're talking about, the peace of mind through a positive attitude. Thank you very much. Amen. And I do hope you will enjoy the sunshine now a little bit. I don't want to keep you locked inside on the Health Emphasis Day. That's also a bit counterproductive. So I hope we can all go and enjoy what God has given us and count our blessings on this beautiful Sabbath day. Amen.
Thank you, Beatrice, for this very, very nice information. And it's 3:50, and if Beatrice doesn't mind, I would like to give the chance, probably in the next few minutes, for people to ask any questions, not to me, to Beatrice. And since you have been such a nice audience, any questions about what was mentioned now, and even in the early service, in the morning. Any questions? Yes.
I was wondering whether you might recommend the practice of mindfulness, and if so, why? If not, why not?
Well, mindfulness is always a good practice, and being aware of your surroundings, grounding yourself, it's kind of a little bit like the exercise that we've done. Mindfulness in itself as a concept is important because it teaches you to be aware. especially in a crisis, an anxiety crisis, a panic attack, when your thoughts are spiraling completely out of control. It helps you to ground yourself, to say, okay, to focus on your breathing, on your environment, and to just be in the moment. That is mindfulness. We're talking a little bit more about mindfulness tomorrow. Now, there are certain practices that supposedly lead to mindfulness, and I'm sure you alluded to those as well. Mindfulness in itself is a good thing, but how to achieve mindfulness, there are different ways. And I personally always prefer those that don't make me lose control. So there's things like autogenous training or yoga or all of these, but they're not for me because I would like to be in control of my own thoughts. I don't want anybody to suggest me what I'm supposed to think. So I usually practice the progressive muscle relaxation. That's a very good one. You can just look that up in the internet. It's open source. It's a good practice of mindfulness because you just flex your muscles and you let go, and then you focus on the relaxation. So there's actually just having the control over your own body without going on mental journeys or suggestive pictures in your mind. So this is what I prefer. But mindfulness in itself, as a concept, is important. I mean, even Jesus said, "Consider the lilies in the field." That is mindfulness because we're looking at a flower, we're appreciating its beauty. So mindfulness in itself is a good concept. How to achieve mindfulness? There are different ways, but I personally prefer those that don't make me lose control over my own thoughts. Mm-hmm.
I just want to add something to that. I think mindfulness as a concept has been hijacked by Buddhism. And I think it's very important to be mindful of this.
That's right. Thank you very much. See, I didn't want to say it that strongly, but you're speaking my heart there, sister. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Personally, I've got a problem with so-called positive thinking. I'm not sure we can control what comes into my brain. How I deal with them afterwards, that's a different story. But I think the positive thinking sometimes, I'm going to block my thoughts, I'm going to stop them from coming to my brain. I'm not sure if I've got that power.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yes.
That's my.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a concept that's called toxic positivity, and that toxic positivity is actually ignoring whatever is going on. Of course, you can't just look at tragedy and just say this is okay somehow and ignore what's going on. That is toxic. That is not what God wants. This is not what we're supposed to do. Even when we're optimistic, we're supposed to just take this world as it is, to see what is happening, to take a tragedy, but to make the best out of it, to see what it does to us. So it will inspire me into action to help, but I shouldn't ignore it. So when we talk about optimism and positivity and a positive attitude, we're not talking about ignoring reality, but we're talking about being mindful of reality and knowing exactly what is happening and then looking for the best possible outcome. So this is how we can control our thoughts. The point is not to spiral out of control and to say this is devastating, this is terrible, and to despair, because despair doesn't lead you anywhere. But you're supposed to just think about it. What is the next logical step to do, and then to make the best out of the situation. And sometimes situations can be horrible, and knowing that we have a God that cares about us, that is also a positive attitude. Even though we might feel devastated, like the Apostle Paul said, we're perplexed but not crushed, right? We're struck down but not destroyed. That is a positive attitude. It's realizing reality and accepting it, but doing something with it. Mm-hmm.
Last week at the center, Isabel was talking about meditation, helping you with stress. So it is a Christian meditation.
Well, this would be a better question for Isabel to answer because I was not there. Come.
Okay, just to go into the context, I was talking about how we can stretch our telomeres or telomeres. And there is scientific studies who link the longevity of your cells, of the body cells, with meditation. And now you ask what sort of meditation we are talking about. And of course, as a Christians, we meditate in the Word of God. That's one type of meditation. But actually, it's any sort of meditation that allows you to contemplate something that is beautiful, something that actually helps your mind to be detoxed from all these horrible things that we get it from the news, right? So if you are Christian, of course, meditation in the Word of God. But if you are a no believer at all, right, and you do any other sort of meditation, of course, is helpful as well, right? So on Sabbath, of course, last week I was talking about Christian meditation, yes. There is no proper recipe, but if you do it every day as an early morning meditation, right, even if you just read a positive quote from a Bible verse, I can tell you, it can really stay with you for the rest of the day. And then if some situation comes, actually, I strongly believe the Holy Spirit will refresh your, helps you to have the Bible verse to come to your memory and say, oh yes, I read that thing, and carry on. And of course, you can do another meditation at evening. I think that is very much to the person. It's very personal as well. You know, the fact that you pray as well, pray is a way of meditation. So it's a very personal level, how much you feel that you need to have it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And that is true. It actually changes your brain for the better, so it prevents dementia and Alzheimer. That's a very positive side effect.
And how actually, that was just going to be my next question. You're talking about positivity. Is that actually going to help to strengthen the brain to stay with the dementia or the forgetfulness?
Well, prevention is always a big deal because obviously through the health message we're trying to prevent diseases, but dementia has been studied a lot, so there are plenty of practices that help prevent dementia or at least push it back a little bit, because of course depending how old you get. But exercise prevents dementia. 150 minutes a week of exercise have been proven to prevent dementia. Meditational practices help. Learning a language, having a creative hobby, playing piano, an instrument, or drawing, painting, all these things that help our brain to detach a little bit from reality and just to focus in on ourselves. Though this is always a good thing. And I want to add something to this because for me, the main important take-home message is to have spiritual health, to achieve spiritual health. Because often with our health message, we like to have a to-do list. And I know we're all of us doers. We say, okay, what do I do in order to get this done? So we have a to-do list. We have the 8 health principles. We have the mental health principles. We need to do this. We need to do that. And every day we have a to-do list. We tick it off. And ta-da, we have prevented everything. It doesn't work this way. And life, like every medical doctor can tell you, life doesn't work this way. And people still get sick. And things still happen. So obviously, we cannot have 100% control about our health and our lives. But what helps us here is our spiritual health, having an actual connection with God and cultivating our relationship with God. That will help us overcome those things that we cannot control. That will help us to accept our mortality. It will help us to accept our vulnerability because we are created beings. We're not all powerful. We're not the ones that will live forever just by our own doing, but it will help us to accept that everything is grace and that everything is a gift. And once we have made that switch in our minds, once we have achieved the spiritual health, then the mental health and the physical health will also fall into place. So, for example, a meditational practice can be a simple thing. It can be learning a chapter of the Bible by heart or a beautiful poem. So all of these things help with prevention of disease. But of course, we cannot control our fate. We cannot control our health outcome. Only God can do that. So spiritual health is just as important as mental and physical health. Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much, Beatrice, for all the wisdom that you shared with us. And you've covered quite a bit in a short period of time in the field of psychological, emotional, and spiritual health. But then you mentioned the word just now, dementia, which is the area of mental health itself. So I was wondering whether one of these days you might come back and talk about this topic, the mental health, because sometimes we think we do interchange those terms. We think they are the same thing, whereas in fact they are not. Because mental health has a stigma that goes with it. And that's something which even as church members we need to be aware of and do something about it as well in terms of trying to work on this stigma, which is mental health.
You're absolutely right. Well, I don't want to take tomorrow's presentation for today because tomorrow morning is all going to be about mental health as well. So I'm going to talk about resilience and preventing dementia and also emotional resilience. I'm going to touch on that tomorrow, and of course we're going to talk about the physical side. Anna is going to talk about it tomorrow with nutrition and how we can influence our mental health from a nutritional and exercise point of view. So not to take too much away from tomorrow, of course mental health is attached to a stigma, but this again helps us to spring into action to talk about it. This is why we're here. There shouldn't be any stigma because mental health is important. Even Ecclesiastes, even King Solomon said, practice self-care, wash, anoint your head with oil, wear white clothes, make sure that you cultivate your relationships and that you eat and that you drink. It is important to practice self-care, and self-care is something that helps with our mental health. Now, it's important not to mix up mental health with mental illness, because mental health is good for us and it's for people like you and me who just try to get through the day-to-day business. But of course, negative thinking patterns, cognitive distortions, etc., but also imbalances, chemical imbalances, all of this can lead to mental illness. And of course, there's a genetical disposition for mental illness as well. Now, that's a completely different pair of shoes, and that needs to be treated professionally. So seeking counseling, seeking treatment, and overcoming that stigma is a very important first step, and it's very courageous, because admitting that something is wrong, that of course takes a lot of courage. So thank you very much for pointing that out, and tomorrow we're going to talk more about how we can achieve resilience and work towards prevention. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. Was great for this. It was very good time, and this afternoon we learned a lot. We already learned a lot in the morning, and now we further learn with you this. On your seats or outside, there is this set of links, and some of you have been asking how we can find exercise to be mindful and all these things. Especially the mentalhealth.org.uk, it has links to YouTube videos where you can see these sort of short exercises. Depends what you feel more better and more comfortable. There is as well links to the South England Conference counselling services. Everything is very confidential, of course, the counsellors. Just take one with you, and has a lot of links and resources, right? The objective of the symposium is not to give answers to everything, because not even ourselves we have, but just to create more awareness about our own mental health and We are not really in a position to go and make diagnosis, but we can start thinking how we can probably approach the professionals or what probably we need, or even not for ourselves, but if we have a friend in need, at least we are a little bit more mindful about it. I hope you like it. I hope to see you tomorrow here from 10 to 12. Beatrice is going to talk about resilient. And then we're going to have Anna Thompson, who is going to talk about mental health and nutrition. And at the end, we should join or have a small gathering around a very nice, simple meal that the husbands of these ladies are going to prepare in the kitchen. So it's something simple, but it's something that is going to empower your brain. And meanwhile, you can just mingle among ourselves and have a good social gathering. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and enjoy your afternoon.